My name is Josh Epperson. Have the opportunity to talk with you about your personal effectiveness during a pandemic. Over the next 50 minutes, we're headed on a pretty targeted journey about a topic of where you are currently and the transition that's required for where you want or need to be in the future. So to get the most out of your time, make sure you have a piece of paper and a pen where you can jot notes, reflections, because we're going to be doing some real-time work, and it'll just help you capture your thoughts in real time and then share them with the rest of the group. So to get the most out of it, I'm going to need you to reflect. I'm going to need you to share, to type, and to interact. Otherwise, it's just going to be me talking the whole time, and nobody wants that. If you haven't already, grab a piece of paper like I suggested and have that ready to go. Additionally, let's talk about technology. There's 3 ways for you to interact today. The first is we'll have some polls that we'll do throughout that'll just get it a quick opportunity for you to respond. The second is after some targeted reflection, I'm going to ask you to share with everybody else. The way you do that is you raise your hand, the little hand in the toolbar, and you can raise your hand to speak, and I'll unmute you so that you can share. Please do that. Let's not wait to have somebody jump in. The other way is to use a chat, and you can send a chat if that is better for you. Feel free to do that. So let's get started here. We're going to warm it up, and let's begin with our first poll. And it's a simple one. Are you ready to roll? Yes or no? All right. Yes, yes, yes. We got lots of yeses coming in. No, no no's. That's great. Still coming in. You're figuring out that polling function. That's great. All right. Well, let's move. If I can figure out how to progress this. So let's talk about transitions. Here are a few of the transitions that I've been on recently, from co-working and office spaces to my couch and working from home. I've been transitioning from a gym with others to work out with to doing some of this off my dining room table. It's actually been in my garage on a bike. Other transitions I've been facing are from dropping our kids off on the bus or picking them up from the bus to doing schoolwork in front of a screen at home. And generally speaking, just this pervasive, we have so much stuff going on, to what I can typify as trying to get my feet underneath me around just sitting in front of the fire and roasting marshmallows. We have a fire pit on our back patio, and I can't tell you how many nights we've been spending hours out there together before the kids go to bed. So it's this transition from everything to one thing. So I'm sure a lot of transitions are coming to mind for you. We're all in this together. And while you're thinking about your transitions, I want you to have a sense for how we're going to spend our time today. First, we're going to level set on our understanding of crisis, so we can all start with a similar kind of background. Second, we're going to locate ourselves in that story. Third, we're going to identify what will make us effective in our crisis. And fourth, we're going to name what I call newness, or the behaviors that will help us create newness as a result of this crisis. I want you to think about your transitions, about the transitions that are impacting you the most right now. And I want to get a sense for who we have in the conversation. So I'm just going to launch another poll here. What transitions are currently impacting you the most? Got some options there. Work, transitions around health and fitness, transitions around family, school, yours or your kids, social relational transitions, emotional well-being transitions, spiritual transitions. You can even pick other if you don't like my categories. Got a lot of results coming in here. It looks like social and relational are kind of starting to tip the scales. Work is high up there as well. Let's see if we can get a few more responses here before we move. Yeah, work and social relational. I'll share these results here in just a second so you can see them. A lot of social relational. Almost got everybody. I'm going to go ahead and just show these results. So it looks like out of the folks, we had almost 100% participation. Looks like social relational wins out, and it looks like work is a close second. And then kind of on the tail there, health and fitness and family. So part of why this is important is because this is the context for what it means to be effective during this pandemic. So we use this as the backdrop for what effectiveness looks like in our context. I like to think of crisis as the context for pandemic effectiveness. These are the characters that represent the word crisis in Mandarin. These were popularized in the late 50s by JFK during his campaign speeches. And crisis essentially is made up of two characters, dangerous and critical point. Sometimes it gets mistranslated. The critical point gets mistranslated to opportunity. Not going to spend a lot of time on that. I have some resources that I can send out as a follow-up of why that's a mistranslation. But the bottom line here is that these characters that make up crisis is that they describe a moment where things begin to go awry. And together, these characters tell a story of a dangerously critical point in time. So I want you to begin thinking about this pandemic and those dangerously critical points in time that have had an impact on you. Keep that as a reference point along with those transitions that you're thinking about. And that becomes our context for what it means, what it looks like for us to be effective during this pandemic. And I just want to ask a really quick question. Does this concept of a dangerously critical point in time, does it resonate with you? Yes or no? Yeah, it looks like lots of yeses coming in. I assumed it would, but it's helpful to see this dangerously critical moment in time resonates with me. So again, keep that as a reference point as we move through our time today. So with that, let's dive into kind of level setting on our understanding of crisis. Let's talk about the nature of crisis. When I'm reflecting on what the nature of a crisis is and the variables that make up a crisis, there are a few things I'm honing in on. One, I'm honing in on the intensity. So how intense is my experience of this event? I'm honing in on and trying to learn about the time or the period that it took me to complete inception to resolution or new normal. And I'm honing in on how long, what I call the peak duration, how long that point lasted. Okay. Additionally, I like to think about this crossover point. And this crossover point is important because the work on the left of being effective is very different than the work on the right. So the work on the left focuses on getting our bearings and reorienting ourselves to what we've just been hit with. Whereas the work on the right is about focusing on what lies ahead and reorienting ourselves to the future. I will say this, there is, and this is possible for every crisis, there is a potential to regress. And so that line oftentimes will cross over to the right and we'll come back over to the left and we'll cross over to the right and we'll do this loop of regression and progression. And that's okay. That's part of the process and that's part of the nature of crisis. So for simplicity's sake, crises that are more intense, that have a longer peak duration and require an elongated, elapsed recovery time are more difficult to navigate. The other concept I want to share with you is the notion that compounding crises are impactful in a unique way. And I want to talk about that. And you'll notice that the duration of time here has changed from time to 4 weeks. When multiple crises are experienced in a condensed period of time, the impact is exponential. It's like dog years. So when you have 4 crises in 4 weeks, what you experience is not 4 crises. You experience an exponential impact of those crises. Furthermore, multiple crises in a condensed time frame negatively impact your ability to complete your full cycle from inception to resolution or new normal. Additionally, we know because of research that when you fail to complete the cycle from inception to completion or resolution or new normal, we know that that stifles individuals' development. Why? So why is that? It's because the complete event has the potential to create behaviors, understanding, awareness. It has the potential to build muscles in us. And when we fail to make a complete cycle, those muscles are atrophied. So here's how I like to think about potential or arrested development when we're faced with multiple crises. The upside of the arch is where we have the potential to stabilize. The downside of the arch is where we have the potential to become. When intensity is high and we experience multiple crises in a short period of time, it's difficult to stabilize, let alone become. So now I want to just dive in for a minute here and look about the coronavirus crisis in real life. So in roughly a month, we've experienced a lot of crisis. Let's look at a few examples. We've gone from hugs, high fives, physical closeness to social distancing. We've gone from working at the office to working from home. We've gone from a healthy family to family members get sick. We've gone from kids at school to parents homeschool. We've gone from laid off to unemployment and a job search. We have all these things at play. There's multiple crises happening simultaneously in a short period of time. It's like facing off with a fire hose. We have each crisis that's unique in intensity and duration. It's like you're juggling a knife, a ball, and a handkerchief, and you care about them equally. And we have some that are resolved and some that are underway. And it's like waiting for the next shoe to drop. No wonder this is such a difficult and crazy time to be effective in. I want to talk about, from there, the work of effectively navigating crises. So, again, we're moving from a dangerous critical point to a resolution or a new normal. Now, I want to stop here and I want to say, this is real work and there's no way around it. You either do it or you don't. And if you don't do it, what happens is that you end up avoiding. A lot of times I hear people say, oh, well, it'll just get better with time. And time will not make this better. The work I want you to think about is twofold. To the left, I want you to think about the work of getting your feet back underneath you. And to the right, I want you to think about the work of looking toward what lies ahead or becoming. So the work of stabilizing, it connects to intensity and begins at that dangerous critical point, and it subsides at that crossover. Whereas the work of becoming connects to time and begins near your crossover and concludes at the resolution of your crisis or your new normal. Now, I want to pause for a second because I think this will resonate. I've heard of two camps that have kind of emerged during this whole crisis. The two camps sound like this. One says, this is traumatic. Don't expect me to think about the future. Don't expect me to think about what good can come from this. The other says, we've got to make something great from this. Let's move. I don't know if you've heard kind of those two debates, but I want you to hear me really clearly. One set of work is not better than the other. Both are required for success. What I will tell you is the statements tell us more about the individual who said them than what's most important. And that's critical insight if you're leading anybody. Where you are is where you begin. Plot your course from there and encourage others to do the same. So who are you when crisis hits? Have you ever heard that adage? Life is 10% what happens and 90% how you react to it. I think it's such a great quote. And I want to tell you a little story and get you thinking about who you are in the midst of crisis. So the other night, my wife and I were cleaning up in our playroom. Half the bookshelf was emptied on the floor because our boys used it to build a barricade. So we were cleaning up all the books, and my wife came across a book a good friend had given me years ago. It's called Tomorrow, Adventures in an Uncertain World. The link for the book is down there in the corner, and you'll get that later. We read the entire story cover to cover. It had been years since I read it. But I want to read an excerpt to you from it right now. Ultimately, there are only two kinds of people. There are those who are certain the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and there are those who believe the best is yet to come. And actually, there's a third kind of person who thinks traditional Irish dance is the highest form of creative expression, but I don't really want to talk about them. What I do want to hear is from you, which animal do you resonate with the most when you're faced with a crisis? Do you resonate with the wise parrot, the grumpy frog, the fuzzy bear, or the dancing turtle? Got some answers coming in. Fuzzy bear is winning out. It's the smile, I think. I did this with both my boys, and both of my older boys said fuzzy bear. Oh, thank you for your honesty, grumpy frog. That's hard to acknowledge, but yes, some of us do show up as a grumpy frog. Lots of fuzzy bears, lots of optimists on this call. And a couple wise parrots, we need you. Let's get a couple more responses here. Why this is important, and I'm just going to, you can see these here. Fuzzy Bear wins out. Why this is important is because this helps us contextualize ourselves in the story that is our crisis. And we cannot become effective until we understand who we are in the midst of our context. I want you to look at this. When you think about locating yourself in this crisis, in your crises, I want you to think about two axes. I want you to think about stabilizing and becoming. See, this pandemic is personal. And so where we find ourselves in it is as unique as the individuals responding to the question. At the onset of a crisis, there are two types of people. Who you are in the crisis depends on your history with crisis. You either avoid it and move forward, or you hunker down and close up. Those who avoid it and move forward are squarely and singularly focused on the future. And I've heard very dear friends say, nothing has changed in this crisis. I'm not looking back. And if you're hunkered down, you're just trying to get a sense of my feet back underneath me. You're focused on what's right in front of you. And I want you to take a few minutes, and this is where we're going to raise our hands and probably have a few of you share. So get prepared to respond. So get your papers out, and I have a few questions for you. I want you to reflect on your experience of this crisis, and I want you to pick an unresolved crisis that was triggered by this pandemic. And I want you to identify if you're more hunker down or more move forward in your response. And in just a minute, I'm going to have you raise your hand and share your reflections. So I'm going to give you just a minute. We're going to pause. There's going to be a silence. And I want you to capture your thoughts. When you think about this crisis and your experience of it, are you more move forward at the expense of everything that is behind you? Or are you more hunker down and get stuck? Give you a few moments to capture your reflections, and then when you're ready, I'd encourage you to raise your hand, and I'd like you to share who you are in your crisis and maybe just some thoughts on why. Who's going to start us off? I'm assuming you all have a hand raise option. Great. All right, let's. All right, Barbara. Let's get you, Barbara, you should be, Barbara, you should be able to talk. I would love to hear you. Where do you find yourself in this current pandemic, and do you have a sense for why?
So I'll start with my unresolved crisis that was triggered by the pandemic, and that is what to do for work. Yeah. I, a few years ago, lost my career because of a workers' comp injury. And so I've spent the last several years, by the way I reacted to that crisis was I tried to keep moving forward. Yeah. And I found myself very frustrated because I wasn't able to. Physically, I was not able to move forward. The workers' comp system is very slow. 3.5 years later, I'm still in it. I couldn't move forward.
Do you have any sense for why you picked move forward versus hunker down?
The reason, well, because it happened suddenly, it came very unexpected. And in order to keep hope alive, I felt like I had to move forward. I had to get that frame of mind in order to make it through the surgeries that I had to have and the pain that I endured and the loneliness and isolation from being off work. It was what I focused on was moving forward. But every time I tried to move forward, it was like the rug got pulled out from underneath me again.
Got it.
So in this crisis, the pandemic, I've been looking for places to volunteer or trying to decide about going back to work part-time. And what I find myself doing now more, I think because of the lessons I learned from trying to move forward, is I'm doing more hunker down.
Got it.
There's nothing I can do about it right now. I learned, I think, patience from my previous crisis. And so in this crisis, not that I'm not impatient, because I am. There's just, I'm frustrated with a lot of things that you try to do that you can't do.
Yeah.
But I feel like I try to bring myself to the present moment. And when I get frustrated, say, but I'm okay.
Got it.
I look around and I've got everything I need and I'm okay.
Barbara, thank you so much for taking the leap and sharing first. And it's fascinating to see how in one crisis, you're moving forward and then you're recognizing that you're hunkering down and how you're at these extremes. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to open it up to put you back on mute and open it up to others. Is there someone else who would like to share about where they find themselves? Yeah, Deborah, let me get you in.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Hey, John. Great exercise so far. So my chat is only giving me the ability to type in, and when I
There we are. Deborah, are you on? Sorry about that. Go ahead and share with us.
Okay, so I think I just hit enter, and I think everybody can see the answer I just put there. So as a company that's going to be 9 years old next month, it was pretty critical for us to stop and figure out pretty quickly how we can successfully carry through this unknown period. I call it the limbo that everybody's in. Most people are trying to figure out what's next. A lot of people have lost their jobs. We decided quickly that we needed to figure out how we can continue adding value to our audience, whether it's clients, prospects, or just people that are new to us. We need to continue getting our name out there without selling. And that's kind of, that's critical to me and my team, that we absolutely not try to sell during this time. So we devised a schedule of free webinars, just 30-minute webinars, and they were so well received last month. We're doing one a week, that we're doing it again in May. And not only has that boosted our visibility worldwide, we're all getting more connections from it on LinkedIn. That's my thing. But the point I'm making is, it's not the time to crawl under a rock. It's not the time to just be taken over by the fear that's very natural for this type of a scenario. It's a time to get creative, put your heads together, figure out how you can be effective through this period, so that when the bullwhip effect is what a mentor of mine calls it, when things pass, and they will, we don't know what the new normal is going to be, but you need to be in a position where you can hit the ground running. and be ready to service all those people that have been attentively listening to you during the interim time. And keep your, in sales, you have to keep your pipeline full no matter what. So that's why I chose the move forward mode. There's no way I'm gonna crawl under a rock.
Well,
So,
and I can imagine, Debbie, that that you come to that move forward having done some hunker down work, and you bring a clear head and a clear heart to the choices that you're making because of having done some work. So, and we're going to look at that in just a second. I'm going to put you back on mute and try to open it up for one other person. I got one here. There you go. Can you please share kind of where you find yourself on these axes? Charlene?
Yes. Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. Yes, I find myself at the move forward stage, so future focused. And when I have to think about why, I have learned from experience, crisis or difficult situations, that to me, it's more about lessons learned. So what I can learn from those experiences, because it's not something that you can actually change what happened in the past, besides just, again, what worked, what didn't work, and how it can help you move forward. In terms of the crisis right now, it was completely unexpected. And I think this is something for us all worldwide. And everyone had to just pick up their game and make a run for it. And I do believe that, yes, it is important to be present focused and take in all that surrounds you, but not to get stuck in it. And together with your team, especially if you're running a company or if you're a manager leader, is to work together towards what are we going to do next, but to have a good basis for it. So that's where I find myself right now.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Charlene, for sharing that. What I want to do is I want to reiterate a point. And the point is this: both of these archetypes are essential for success. Oftentimes, strong strengths are overused, and we end up over-focusing on one at the expense of doing the work of the other. Both archetypes are required to what I would call move to the middle. And I want to look at this move for a minute. I'm calling it hunker forward. And I can imagine to yourself, you're thinking, really? You got me on this webinar to say the epitome is hunker forward? That's what I'm aspiring to. And what I'd say is that that's actually the point. The point is that we normally don't carry forward our scar tissue. And here's what I'll say: we don't carry it forward because it usually makes us look weak. And that's not something we normally lead with. That's not something we normally parent with. That's not something we are normally a neighbor as. We don't like to show up as weak. So you can call it whatever you want, but I'm sticking with hunker forward, and here's why. One, I think it's accurate, and two, I think you'll remember it. So the hunker forward archetype is this archetype of a person whose present marks their future. It's almost like you carry this limp in your values, your choices, and your behaviors. And I would hope that we all become people who are able, who are secure enough to hunker forward and let our hunker down mark who we are going forward. Because I think, this is again my belief, is that your hunker forward leading from that place is actually what allows us to not return to what was, but to return to a new normal. It marks us and we carry it forward. And regardless of where you begin, whether it's move forward or hunker down, the work of moving toward the middle includes two types of behaviors. And I want to look at these. But you first have to focus on stabilizing. You have to choose behaviors that help you protect your core and embrace your context. It doesn't matter where you start. If you don't do this work, you won't complete the full cycle of your crisis from inception to new normal. You have to move to protect my core, and you have to move to embrace my context. Now, I want to give you a few thoughts to think about when you're choosing behaviors in this area. One, the goal is not to see your crisis as an opportunity. Remember how in the beginning I mentioned the mistranslation of the crisis characters in Mandarin? That JFK actually mistranslated that in his speeches, the second as opportunity. The goal isn't to see your crisis as an opportunity, as if it were something you would wish on others to help them learn or grow. Crisis sucks. There's nothing good about a crisis when it hits. It pulls the rug squarely out from underneath you, and you have to stabilize. Two, be honest about how this event has scarred you and carry that tissue forward. Let it impact your values, your choices, and your behaviors. Three, get into your rational limbic brain. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's fine. You can go on and Google it later. You can research healthy ways to trigger cortisol. There are very clear tips and techniques for how you can trigger cortisol to get you stabilized so that you can start to embrace your context and become. Fourth, practice over time. I want you to reflect on your past crises, journal your actions, and start to see the patterns about how you respond when crisis hits and how you could respond if something similar happened in the future. So I want to share a little bit about how I plotted my course to the middle with you. And so we're going to look at, and some of you have seen this if you read my article, but I want you to look at my move toward the middle. So when I think about protecting my core in this pandemic, and this was very real, this was at 1 a.m. in the morning as I'm sitting on the stairs with a sick family from this virus. Here's the behaviors that started to emerge as I've got to do these things. Aware that it's not supposed to go this way, owning my aggravation, missing physical closeness, being able to say, you know what, I can take a break and check out from right now. It's just too much. You know what? Whether you like it or not, we conserved our household supplies. I'm like, keep it close. These sorts of behaviors are about behaviors that provide safety and security. And I guarantee you, if you don't at some point choose these behaviors, you will go on into the future as though nothing has changed. The other set of behaviors that came really apparent to me were around embracing my context, finding humor in quarantine parodies, learning what technology, information, and negativity triggers this sense of helplessness, determining how to help dependents and how to help my kids thrive in online school, trying to take tasks like household cleaning, yard work, homeschooling that I previously paid others to do, bringing them back in to our house, rekindling interests and keepsakes and old hobbies. We pulled out our sewing machine, haven't sewed forever. We taught our young boys how to sew. These are the types of behaviors that begin to help you move toward looking at the future and moving ahead. They're the behaviors that kind of help you dip your toe in the water a little bit. You're not fully in, but you're starting to move in that direction. Remember, your move is as personal as your experience. You may resonate with some of these, but I guarantee you this model will not fit you perfectly, and it shouldn't. This was my work, but what I want to encourage you to do is your work. So we're going to reflect again, and we're going to provide another opportunity for you to share. I want you to reflect on your move during this crisis. I want you to identify one or two behaviors that either have helped you protect your core and embrace your context, or that will help you protect your core and embrace your context. I want you to jot one or two words down and write a few adjectives that help you describe what they mean for you. Second, I want you to take a moment to look at, gosh, if I haven't done that, when could I practice it? Where could I bring those behaviors to life? And then I'm going to have you raise your hand to share. Feel free to raise your hand whenever you're ready. We've got lots of reflection happening right now. What's one thing you have done or could do to protect your core or embrace your context? And what would it mean to you? Is there anybody out there who would like to share? This obviously gets a little bit more personal. All right, William.
Hello, Josh.
There he is. Go ahead and share with us. Thanks, William.
Okay, I've written down a couple here. The first one that the parts of my brain, the both critical and the creative sides of them, I like to use them in my profession. And it's also something I'm actively doing or always have actively done outside it as well. And that's building things. That allows both sides of my hemispheres of my brain to be engaged at the same time. It's how I kind of conducted my business and sales, and also as a professional in my business that I currently have. The other one is driving. Allows me the opportunity of calming, sense of calm. Also gives me inspiration, especially during the fall and the spring months, the summer months. I'm spending a lot of time. I've done 2,500 miles in the past 2 weeks, just on day trips. So those are some things that I've noted for protecting my core, and to also give me a little context.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I want you to take that and others for the reflections that you have, and we're going to kind of move toward what it looks like when you start to take hold of those behaviors. You can actually return to new versus return to normal. These are the things I started thinking about, of making my context new. And there's lots of things our family is doing new. And I want to give you just some time to reflect on your newness that's possible if you take hold of some of these behaviors like William just did. And as you're doing that, I want to give you a sense to reflect on that. And as you're doing that, I want to share with you a little bit about my own journey with that. One of the things I've made new in the past many months, I'm making a 40-year-old morning routine new. Sounds silly, but I love drinking coffee. But even more than that, I love it when someone makes it for me. And not only can I tell you all of my favorite coffee shops in and around Seattle and Washington, I can tell you my favorite coffee shops across the country. You can ping me afterwards if you need recommendations. Once we open up, you can go visit them. But in 40 years I have never owned a coffee grinder. I don't make coffee at home. I've never owned a coffee grinder. That is until this pandemic hit. Went on Amazon and bought one. I go out every morning to get coffee. I haven't done that for 6 weeks. And I've created this whole new morning ritual that I never imagined that I would enjoy. What's odd is that it is super fun to have my kids grind the beans. It's super fun to have them watch the experience, something that they've never done with me before. And so as we're, at time, I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about your crisis, your movement toward hunker forward behaviors, and your practice. And I want you to just describe what will make new if you do these things. What will you make new if you choose some of these behaviors and practice them? And I'll give you a minute just to finish that up, and then I'm going to close with a story. I'm going to close with a story, and I'm going to use a timeline to tell it. In 2011, Hollywood came out with a movie called Contagion. I remember when this movie came out. I remember seeing the trailer. I'm not a sci-fi, I don't like sci-fi movies. And I remember seeing the trailer and never watching it because I said to myself, I'm not interested. That sort of thing won't happen. They're making money on fear. Never watched it. What's fascinating is that my wife and I did watch it the other night for the first time, and it is dangerously prophetic to what we have been experiencing. Fast forward to 2015, Bill Gates' TED Talk on the next outbreak, we're not ready. He gave this talk in Vancouver, and I remember when this talk came out, it was on the heels of the Ebola crisis. I remember when it came out, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, that was brilliant. Makes a lot of sense. That's really important. Someone should do something about it. And I remember watching that again just recently, and again, thinking to myself, wow, that was very prophetic to what we're experiencing 5.5 years later. And then I fast forward to 2020, when my family gets sick. Takes on a whole new meaning when a virus enters your home against your choosing. And I think to myself, oh wow, this is real. We should do something. We're symptomatic and we need to self-quarantine for 14 days. And I tell this story for one reason. It took me nearly a decade to have my behaviors, my choices, and my values impacted. And it doesn't have to be that way for you. What I'd encourage you to do is to think about the crises you're in right now. Locate yourself in that story. Ensure that you have protected your core, embraced your context, and have begun to move forward. You can do that through the behaviors you choose and how you practice them. Because it doesn't have to take a decade for you to live and act differently. You can do it right now. So I hope you will. I want to thank you for the time. If there are any follow-up questions or concerns or curiosities you have, don't hesitate to email me or call my cell. Additionally, if you think there are others in your network who would value from this sort of presentation, let me know. I'll go ahead and email this out to everyone. And again, thank you for your time and appreciate the conversation. Wish you all the best on your effectiveness during this pandemic. Take care.